Hi, everyone. It's 2 o'clock on Monday, April 14th, and I am so glad that you're here with us. If you are wondering where you are and you want to make sure you are at a MEC webinar, this is part of our series dealing with FAFSA completion. This one in particular is called Two States, One Mission, FAFSA Completion Insights from Iowa and Nebraska. And we're going to hear from some amazing people doing amazing work in both of those states. Before we get started, though, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jenny Parks. I'm the Vice President of Policy and Research at MEC, and I wanted to give you just a few housekeeping reminders. First of all of the resources associated with this webinar will be posted on the MEC website, and you'll receive a little follow-up email after the webinar that will give you links to everything. We will record it, and that will be available as well. If you are interested in connecting and chatting with your colleagues, please use the chat feature. But if you would like to ask questions to our presenters, please use the Q&A feature. It lets us keep track of things and make sure that we answer your questions. In this particular case, we're going to hear first from the folks in Nebraska, and then we're going to hear from the folks in Iowa, and then we're going to ask all of your questions. Also, when you receive that email afterwards, you're going to have a very short survey that we will ask you to complete. It takes less than 3 minutes, and it lets us know how we did today and how we can do better in the future. So I am going to get started here. So welcome. I'm going to have you go ahead and switch slides, and I'll introduce our speakers. Is Iowa going first? Okay, so I totally messed that up. I apologize. Iowa's going first, which is wonderful. We have Christina Sabue and Elizabeth Yadoff. So Christina is the section chief for community engagement at the Bureau of Iowa College Aid at the Iowa Department of Education. And Elizabeth is the community engagement consultant for the Bureau of Iowa College Aid at the Iowa Department of Education. And I am so delighted to have you both here. The work you're doing with data and sharing it with your stakeholders in the states is a real game changer and very inspiring. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate the kind introduction. So yes, my name is Christina Sibui, and I've been overseeing community engagement at Iowa College Aid for almost 12 years. We're getting close to that. And in this time, we have built a very robust system supporting FAFSA completion. We're going to talk to you a little bit about our agency and this process, and a little bit about also the supports that we provide to students in this effect. So student level FAFSA reports are the important part we're going to talk about today. But first, I'd like to give you some context to Iowa College Aid. Iowa College Aid is a state agency at the state of Iowa, and we have been for about 75 years an independent state agency that operated supporting grants and scholarships across the state, as well as community engagement and communications and research things across Iowa. In the last year, we merged together with the Iowa Department of Education now as a bureau, but we continue to do the same work that we have for many years and continue to grow in support of college attainment and completion. So when we talk about community engagement, the area that I oversee in particular, we actually operate on an ecosystems approach, which essentially the idea is that you're engaging all of the different sectors and agents involved in supporting students as they plan, prepare, access, and succeed in post-secondary education. And as you see in this graphic, the student is always at the center of what we do. And then those concentric circles that go around include the broader collective community and grants that we provide in supporting those entities across the state, actual buildings and institutions that support students, our K-12 institutions, our colleges, and then the staff that do that work directly with students. And then data and research obviously inform all of the work that we do continuously. So what does Iowa look like in terms of FAFSA completion? Now, I'm going to be honest, we are definitely not the top in terms of FAFSA completion, but what we do well is lining up our FAFSA completion with our post-secondary enrollment. Those things line up very well. What we're missing, and we hope to keep working towards, is lining up with our intentions a little bit better. But what you can see in terms of trends, I included here starting in 2018 FAFSA cycle, because that is the first year that we began sharing student level FAFSA completion reports. And so you can see there's a lot of Generally speaking, we're on par year over year, but we've had some fluctuations. Some of that has to do with the COVID pandemic, as well as some changes in the FAFSA over the years. But generally speaking, we are recovering well, in particular this year. Generally speaking as well, we tend to exceed national trends in the very beginning of the cycle, but we tend to drop off around March. And we believe a lot of that has to do with the responsibilities in our schools and our counselors kind of shifting that focus. And we're trying to change a bit of that college going focus and making sure that we don't let that drop off. And that's a lot of what community engagement does in supporting directly in the schools and assisting with FAFSA completion. You're looking at about 37,000 public high school seniors every year in the state, and about half of those that are matched to FAFSAs every year. The chart there includes up till our 23-24 cycle. In 24-25, we were at 52%, which was just about 2.5 points down from the prior year. Given the rollout of FAFSA last year, we're very proud of that. Even though we hope to keep growing it. And then this year we are at 45% currently, and we hope to keep making gains now that we're at that place where we start to plateau out. So it all starts with data. The purpose behind these FAFSA completion reports was really to give high school counselors the data and the tools that they need to ensure that high school seniors file their FAFSA. And we did this through a partnership with the U.S. Department of Education, the then Iowa Department of Education, which was separate from us, and then our Iowa area education agencies, AEAs, essentially to break the state down into 9 different regions in the state. And each of those regions provide professional development support and a lot of oversight over the work that's happening in the different K-12 schools. And so we used and leveraged that framework to help distribute and just facilitate the process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. These reports are disseminated to all public high schools in the state, and then any private institution that reports their data to the Iowa Department of Education is included in that data set as well and gets those reports. Student level FAFSA completion reports are implemented in the form of a weekly automated report that goes to each of those schools, and then they get the data that shows both generally speaking what the completion looks like, as well as the student level information on whether a student has completed or not, or whether they may have started, not completed, or if there's an error. And so they get that data automatically every week, and it assists in basically tailoring response. So instead of the school having to maybe go through the process of requesting that information, they get it automatically to their inbox, and then they can work on an action plan in terms of following up with students. So for example, they can look at an action plan on all the students that have started not completed, or any of the error reports that have come back, and then we provide them with assistance on how to respond to those errors. And we are one of the only states that has implemented this type of process. And it was, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we got to that process. So data sharing structure, the FAFSA data, we are unique in that not everyone is in the same position of actually being the recipient of the FAFSA data. So we get all Iowa FAFSA data to Iowa College Aid. But I think it's important to note that this arrangement was agreed to by the U.S. Department of Education. And so the data can be shared even if you're not the FAFSA data recipient, not the holder of the SAG agreement, but it can be shared in the same format if you're able to partner with your SAG entity. So that data is received at Iowa College Aid. The Iowa Department of Education provides our student enrollment data. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, because that's an important component in the process as well, is getting the right enrollment data to match up with that FAFSA data to make sure that it's as accurate as possible, and taking into consideration a lot of pieces. Sometimes accuracy is not always the most important thing when we're trying to look at keeping some consistency as well across the process. As I mentioned, the area education agencies helped us to basically regionalize this distribution. So instead of signing 300 plus agreements with every high school in the state, we were able to leverage the regional infrastructure at the time and ensure that we were signing 9 agreements, who then filtered down to those individual school districts. And then one of the unique pieces as well with the system is it's actually a Google system where we're able to do some back coding that helps to ensure that there's the right sharing privileges that are accessible at every tier. And it provides, again, that matchup between the individual student records and then puts that into a report format that you can see in summary, but then you can also get the detail and see historically how those things are progressing. And then the email is automated through the system as well. So the way that that's structured is this service folder. This is where all the data comes in. Iowa College Aid matches those two things up, the FAFSA data and the enrollment data. And then that is put into each AEA folder. So there's 9 folders where the AEAs then have subfolders for their school building levels. And then each school building level has a contact person, their local access manager, who will then receive those reports. And then they're responsible for the distribution at their school beyond their level. And that essentially ensures that these handoffs happen at each step of the process. So the successes behind this, the impacts, have been removing barriers. The previous process that we had required someone to know that this exists. You know, there was a lot of outreach that had to happen. Somebody at the school had to take the initiative to get access to the system. They had to identify a file, load that file, get the output, and then figure out how to read that file and do something with it. And that was just a big barrier when it came to getting our counselors to not only get access to the data, but then use it. So that this has really streamlined that process. It also rallied the different partners. We've been able to partner with our Iowa College Access Network, ICANN, as well, in implementing and supporting assistance throughout the state and utilizing this data. Timely reporting, this happens every Wednesday. It's a process that we do with those matches. It's up to date. It ensures accountability because we also ask all of our schools that participate in our Course to College programming to set goals, a FAFSA goal. And that is not intended to be 100%. That's intended to be something that is a bit of a stretch for them, but is attainable. And that means that when they get these reports, they can see their progress not only on our dashboard that's public, but also at the individual student level, how they're making progress, and then address any issues along the way. The data accuracy is really important. We need to make sure that the enrollment data is matching up. We have the potential to now with the Department of Ed to actually match up live data and update it regularly. But that also means that your denominator, your bottom number there, when you're looking at goals, is always going to change. And so we're working very carefully to make sure that we're just giving the right level of up-to-date enrollment data that allows schools to get access to what they need without necessarily constantly moving the mark. It's also readily available, so they don't have to go dig this up, search it out, log into another system. And that was really a huge impetus behind this entire initiative, to make sure that we could remove that step and that extra layer. It's extremely user-friendly. It's just a PDF that shows up in the email. If they want to dig into all the Google stuff in there, all the sheet that's in there, they can, but they don't have to. They can use that PDF to just help drive their action. And then it's actionable, which means they can actually do something with the data that they're receiving and start to tier out the students and how they're going to support them. I'm going to turn it over to Liz to talk a little bit more about the logistics behind these reports.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. Yeah, so now that you guys have that background, we want to expand a little bit on the actual process and distribution of the FAFSA completion reports. So this slide here just kind of talks about what that looks like in getting our local college access or local access managers, ready to go to start receiving these reports. So as Christina mentioned, we partner with our AEA contacts to identify the local access manager each year. So the local access manager is the contact that receives the report. Based on our agreement, only one person per school building can actually receive that report. And we call that the local access manager, or LAM for short. You'll probably hear me say that 42 more times. This is typically your school counselor. It doesn't have to be, but it typically is the school counselor, and the AEA identifies and confirms that person each year for us. And then that person, once they're identified, they must complete a user authorization form, as well as watch a video so they know how to protect student data and student information. So we're really kind of building in that student data protection piece when they're filling out those forms and watching those videos. So once they do all that, and once that's complete, your LAMs will start receiving reports each week. We aim to start those, by the end of October. Obviously, the last 2 FAFSA cycles, we've been a little delayed, but typically we like to see those go out starting in October at some point, and those go through the school year. So we're looking around May 31st. So when that relationship with the student ends, those reports also end. We do have some schools that are eligible to receive them over the summer, but they do have to have an established relationship continuing with the students. Basically, that just means we have to have somebody contracted through the summer that is on contract to help students with FAFSA completion and other college going steps. Next slide, please. Awesome. So Christina touched on this piece a little bit, but this goes a little bit more in depth on the actual data flow and distribution of our reports. So as we mentioned, Iowa College Aid, it starts with us. You know, we match the enrolled high school seniors with names of students who have submitted a FAFSA. So we upload that list into our system, we run our program, and it creates those school-specific reports, which then we distribute to our 9 AEAs. The AEA receives those reports for every school that are within their region, and only the schools within their region. And then they can then actually push the button or distribute the reports to each school. And then from there, we have that local access manager who receives the report on their end, and they can start targeting students and utilizing that. And that happens in a lot of cases. Otherwise, if applicable, the local access manager can then share with any authorized personnel within the school building that needs that data to assist students with FAFSA completion. Okay, so before we get into the actual review or preview of the reports, I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what each LAM will receive weekly. So as Christina mentioned, they get that FAFSA report PDF. That is the main thing that our schools are using. It's pretty user-friendly. They'll receive a completion Excel spreadsheet. If their school allows access to Google, they'll receive a Google Drive for their annual historical reports as well. And then we also link them to our FAFSA dashboard so they can track their own data as well. Okay, this is the bread and butter. This is our the PDF of our FAFSA report. So like I said, it's pretty user-friendly. We try to make it simple for our schools to use and understand and actually make them want to use it. So at the top, we have our just their school summary. So it'll tell them obviously the total number of students within their class, who is completed versus not completed versus not filed. And then they have their completion percentages there as well, which is really helpful. And then we have there's bound to be discrepancies, right, in the data. So if a school has a student that they know has completed their FAFSA, but they're still showing up as not filed, they can report that to us to investigate. And then as we move down, we have our not completed students. So these are students that have submitted their FAFSA, but there's something that needs corrected in order to complete it. We refer to these when we're talking to our schools as, you know, the low-hanging fruit. So these are the students that have that intent. They filed the FAFSA, they are intending to receive aid. They just need a little help on completing it. And then finally, your not filed students. This could go on forever depending on how big your class is. But we do have those as well. So again, that targeted outreach for those counselors who know their students, which students are college intending, they can really target those students to get their FAFSA completed. And then I just wanted to show you guys also this Excel spreadsheet that we also send. This is kind of more of an all-inclusive list. So it shows your completed, not completed, and not filed students. So this is just a nice inclusive list for counselors to use. They know what students have completed, processed, and submitted dates. But then the biggest way we use this form or suggest our counselors use this form or this report is for the verification piece. So they know what students have completed. And then if those students have been selected for verification, they can then again go even more targeted and assist those students through that verification process as well. And then finally, our dashboard. So we like to highlight this because we've put a lot of work into making this happen, and it's highly utilized by our schools and then just other stakeholders within the state. But this is our public dashboard where folks can come in and kind of watch Iowa's FAFSA completion status throughout the year. So at the very top, we have our buckets. Our blue bucket is our state rate. For the current cycle, the green is going to be the previous cycle, and then we have that net difference in the orange. We have a little disclaimer on there. Obviously, we like to see, you know, an increase of 12%, but as we know, the dates didn't really line up for FAFSA completion. So we have that disclaimer that it's not really apples to apples based on the opening date of the FAFSA. But then our schools and really our AAs and our districts can utilize this report, or I'm sorry, this dashboard to track their data. So as you can see at the very bottom, it's probably a little challenging to see, but schools can sort by individual schools or districts, and they can see all the same information that we provided on that PDF. So they're completed, not filed. Those who have set a goal, that's a public goal, so that'll be included here, so they can use that for tracking. And then finally, they can also look at their last year's final completion date to kind of track that and see how they're doing in terms of making it to that next goal. Awesome. Okay, so the last slide I kind of wanted to cover were some of these like implementation pieces. So we know that there's other considerations besides just the partnerships and the distribution process. So we wanted to cover some of those things. So for example, we talked a little bit about student discrepancies. So we aim to make the reports as accurate as possible for schools, while also understanding that there are some things that are beyond our control. So we have created this student discrepancy form for schools to indicate to us when there is a discrepancy. So when they know a student has filed, or they believe a student has filed, they can report that back to us. Typically those issues are due to names. So it's going to be, if a person filed the FAFSA as Jonathan Doe, but maybe on the enrollment file, they're listed as John Doe, right? So our system isn't picking up on nicknames. So we just need to be aware of that. We can manually fix that in our system and move forward to ensure that they have the most accurate information on their report. Same goes for birth date. We see a lot of mismatches due to birth dates being incorrect. Sometimes we have students that reside out of state, but go to school in Iowa. So we see that a lot with our Nebraska neighbors, that the ICER is actually going to Nebraska versus Iowa. So we work with our schools on ensuring that we can, present to them the most accurate data. So, and then beyond that, we also provide a lot of training and resources, not only around our reports, but around FAFSA to our schools. So each year we have an annual training, well, a series, really. We offer about 4 to 5 trainings for anybody that utilizes these reports to provide, all the information that they might need to be successful in assisting their students. And additionally, we have FAQ documents and resources such as if they see that there's an error on a report, we link them directly to, an FAQ document that tells them what that error is and how a student can fix it. So really, again, trying to offer them the most information possible to assist their students. We also offer a statewide training network, or just a network of counselors through our Course to College program, which one of our other colleagues manages. And that's a great network for counselors to get together, just that we can disseminate information to them, offer training, offer resources, really anything along the college going process, with a lot on the FAFSA piece as well. And then so beyond that, I would say one of the biggest undertakings in respect to the reports, beyond the initial setup, obviously that was a huge undertaking just to get it going and up and running, but really is the system maintenance. So annually we do a lot to get the system ready for the next cycle. So just for example, we have to ensure that our school list is up to date. So if we've had school closures and things like that,
I'm sorry to interrupt, Liz, but we can't hear you.
Yes, I noticed that. I'll go ahead and pick up where she left off because I know we're running
Thanks,
over on
Christina.
time. Yeah. So, and we have a lot more information about the details behind the report sharing, and also some changes to our structure, with some changes in our AEA system. But just to give a little piece to close out here, our community engagement program also supports all of this with the different levels I mentioned in the beginning, the kind of the center of the student. We have several different programs and supports that are available to our schools and across the state in implementing this work. So we don't just provide the data and let them, figure it out. We have a lot of hands-on training and support, as Liz started to mention there. And then very lastly, we just wanted to highlight the impact of these reports. These are just 2 quotes that came from both our school counselors who utilize this data in terms of actually supporting the students in completing their FAFSA. So this example of Shaylin that the completion reports help to confirm that they have done everything that they are set up for future successes. And then also from our AmeriCorps student leader, where we pair up our student seniors with their peers to assist in these processes. It really just speaks to the importance in the lives of our students. So I'm going to wrap up there because we want to give our colleagues in Nebraska an opportunity to get started.
Thank you so much. And we will get to questions and connect people for that additional layer of information you've indicated is there behind everything, Christina. So thank you both, Christina and Liz. So now I'm going to introduce our colleagues from Nebraska. Can you guys go ahead and put up your slides? Great. Thank you so much. Well, let me introduce folks who are doing awesome work as well. And what we did is we deliberately took two states that were right next to each other and have a lot in common. And we wanted to showcase different things that they were doing. So now for something totally different, but equally amazing. Welcome Daphne Hall, Senior Vice President of College Access at EducationQuest Foundation. Eric Drumheller, Vice President of Grants and Scholarships at EducationQuest Foundation. Reagan Anson, Vice President of Communications at EducationQuest Foundation, and Richie Morrow, Financial Aid Officer at the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education. And I will just make sure that you guys do let them know what EducationQuest Foundation is, because not everyone will know that. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, so EducationQuest Foundation, we're a nonprofit college access organization based in Nebraska. We've been in existence since 1986, and we are just about to celebrate 40 years of service to our students and families in the state. We have college planning offices in Omaha, Lincoln, Kearney, and Scottsbluff, and our mission is to improve access to higher education. We are funded through a permanent endowment, and so we're able to offer our services free of charge to all Nebraska students and families. So we offer college planning services, need-based scholarship programs. We do college access grants for high schools. We also have resources and programs for middle schools, and we also work very heavily with outreach services to our community-based agency partners in the state. Next slide, please, Eric. So we're going to talk a little bit about universal FAFSA in Nebraska, and by what we mean by that is FAFSA is a high school graduation requirement. The Nebraska unicameral passed a law for the 24-25 academic year, and it is required, FAFSA filing is required for all public high school seniors. The goal of the behind universal FAFSA is to increase the number of Nebraskans earning a diploma, degree, or industry credential by 2030, which is a statewide attainment goal. Another benefit of universal FAFSA is that it ensures students can make informed decisions about their post-secondary education and career goals. When Nebraska passed the law, it was mirrored after several other states that also have a universal FAFSA requirement. And so it includes, the requirement includes that a high school senior completes the FAFSA or an opt-out form. And that opt-out form can be signed by the parent or guardian, a student who is 19 years of age or older, or emancipated minor, or the school principal or the principal's designee, which in most cases is the school counselor. And in Nebraska, the Nebraska Department of Education is responsible for ensuring that schools comply with the law, and they have developed a web page providing guidance for school personnel regarding their requirement. And we can put that link in the chat, but it's also in the slide deck as well. Again, as we researched what other states had done that had this requirement in place, we looked at their best practices, one of which was to establish a statewide task force. So we've done that, and the group consists of key groups to ensure adequate representation of different perspectives. So it includes school administrators, school counselors, community-based agencies, the Nebraska Department of Education, the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education, and EducationQuest. What we did as a task force at the very beginning, after the law was passed, is conduct a needs assessment to determine what was strategies and implementation guidance that would ensure successful implementation of the law. And the key findings from that assessment really focused on an explanation of the why the FAFSA requirement, and to provide some consistent language that could be used by educators when they are talking to peers, but also students and families. The need to raise awareness about the requirement through a public service campaign, and then to provide some resources that administrators and school counselors could use. So specifically, what the task force put together was an implementation guide and a FAFSA completion lesson plan. And that link has been posted in the chat. The lesson plan is mapped to standards, so it ensures relevance when taught in the classroom. I know that's brief. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A for us. And now I'll turn it over to Eric, and he can talk about the Do the FAFSA Nebraska program.
Thank you, Daphne. EducationQuest took this opportunity to think about what we could do to help support the implementation of universal FAFSA and to increase the number of completed FAFSAs in the states, in Nebraska. So we really have 3 different activity streams. They do support each other. The first is we wanted to empower people in Nebraska to assist with FAFSA completion. So we hired a FAFSA training manager who is tasked with implementing a certified FAFSA coach program. The goal of the certified FAFSA coach program is to make sure people have accurate information to help students and families complete the FAFSA. And the other goal of the FAFSA program, and I think this is important, is they are empowered and they feel confident in their ability to help students and families navigate the FAFSA process. We partnered with U Aspire to offer the training, and it was conducted over 4 virtual sessions. Part of the training also encouraged or had the participants build an implementation plan that would indicate how they were going to implement the training back in their community. To encourage attendance, we were able to offer a stipend to both the person being trained and their organization, again, to support the effort of taking on this program. We launched the program in the spring. Given the timing, it mostly focused on our community-based organizations. We plan to re-offer the training this fall, and we'll hopefully support school counselors, and we will support school counselors as well with this. So they'll be able to attend the trainings, complete an action plan, and also be eligible for the stipends. The initial results of our first time offering this is we have 75 coaches from 26 organizations who have been trained and submitted a FAFSA completion plan. Second aspect of the program, and we'll go into these next 2, just touch on them here and go into a little bit more detail in just a moment, is we want to provide financial assistance to support with group FAFSA completion filing efforts. And we want to inform students and parents and others of influence of the importance of completing the FAFSA. So with the second bullet I talked about, second piece of information about providing financial assistance, EducationQuest developed the Do the FAFSA Nebraska Completion Grant. This is open to all high schools and community-based organizations in the state, and they can apply for funding to support their FAFSA completion efforts at their school or their organization. The grant amount ranges from $400 to $2,500, depending on their enrollment. The grant funds can be used to purchase food and to pay for promotional efforts. So this would be things like, putting an ad in the paper or the radio, or printing a poster or a flyer, or mailing information to the student's home about the FAFSA completion event that they have at their school or organization. We did set this program up just on a reimbursement process. So what that means is the school or the organization conducts the activity, saves the receipt, send those in to us, and from there we will issue a payment for the receipt. If a school or an organization had a problem with that, or their school said we can't offer, extend credit to make this happen, we would work with them to make sure that they were able to participate. This year we had 64 recipients. The reports are still coming in. They're due at the end of May, but I can tell you with about half the reports in, the fund supported 62 events with more than 1,500 people in attendance. We're going to offer this program again next year, and I hope that we have more schools and organizations participate. And with that, Reagan is going to talk about our public efforts.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I get the really fun part of this program, which is to create a public awareness campaign. We ended up working with an ad agency based out of Omaha last spring. When we saw the declining rate in FAFSA applications and completions, we decided something had to be done. And I know the National College Attainment Network had created some assets at that time that they distributed to their partners. And so we took advantage of that, and we used a bunch of their artwork and assets that they had to create a campaign that began last June to try to influence completion rates for fall of 2024. And so as part of that, we ran a variety of advertising, a variety of different ads on social media and all the different things. But so I'll talk a little bit more about that, which was phase 1 of this public awareness campaign. In phase 2, which really began in August of this fall, we took the initiative to send out swag to all of the schools in Nebraska. And you can see on this slide some numbers of the number of students, schools, counselors, et cetera. We proactively sent enough pens and stickers, like the water bottle stickers, laptop stickers, enough for every senior in the state. And we also included flyers and posters so the schools could post those. A couple of different buttons that counselors or teachers could wear while they were doing their presentations that Eric talked about, and those events, and t-shirts for the counselors to wear as well, all around this Hey Nebraska, do the FAFSA corny theme. So it was really fun to put together. And we also did large scale banners that could be hung in the schools. And the whole point was to try to have some fun with this, try to get the attention of students, and provide some materials that really reinforce the importance of doing the FAFSA. We also created a landing page called dothefafsa.org, and that ties back to all of the ads that we're doing, and it really directs people to studentaid.gov. We always, every year, do a demo of the FAFSA, and they can also go to EducationQuest to utilize our tools. So this next slide, we really talk about some of the actual nuts and bolts of where we put our ad campaign. And that is basically everywhere. A pretty comprehensive campaign running on social media, all the different channels, television, Hulu, and connected TV. We're also providing the commercials and the still ads in English and Spanish, streaming audio, podcasts, billboards, print ads. We didn't do a ton of print ads. It's not as popular, obviously, as social media, but we did do some. And so we really tried to spread it out and try to catch people wherever they're getting their information. So, so it's been really successful. We continue to get a lot of analytics back. We were really successful with that phase 1 that I talked about that started last June and really ran through August. And then this phase 2, which we're going to show you one of the ads that we ran starting in August, and it was a new ad created with the ad agency, and we call it the FAFSA phenomenon. Eric, if you don't mind giving it a play here.
I keep seeing these letters in the weirdest places. Wait, FAFSA? You're seeing them too?
Whoa, look, another FAFSA thing. I have this feeling we're supposed to do something.
The signs are everywhere.
Several Nebraska high school students captured an interesting cloud formation over Chimney Rock.
I was like, whoa, it was like someone was trying to tell us something.
It's happening all over Nebraska.
A farmer near Red Cloud is scratching his head this morning.
FAFSA? What's that even mean?
Have you seen the signs?
Dude, check it out. Whoa, it's a sign, man. You gotta fill out the FAFSA form every year.
It's time.
breaking news. Another mysterious FAFSA sighting today, this time at Carhenge.
What we're learning about this FAFSA phenomenon is that it's the free application for federal student aid. That's money for college, classes, books, and housing.
So that was our ad. It's super fun, obviously kind of based on the horror movie genre, or the movie Signs, if you remember that, alien life forms. It actually won a Nebraska Addy, so we're really proud of that. And that was the long version. We have a lot of different cuts that we use based on where we're posting that ad. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, we hired a social media influencer who's in Omaha and has a really large following, and created some social shorts that we did placement with, on TikTok and different platforms. And those were focused on FAFSA FOMO, fear of missing out, and really utilized, you can see on her devices in these still shots, utilize those NCAN assets and really, tweak them to be Nebraska specific. So if you want, you can watch those. I'm going to actually have Eric go to the next slide, because we posted all of these things on a social press kit. And if you've never used a social press kit, we subscribe to it. I think the subscription for a year was like $800, and so worth it. Every month, my team and I create new memes based on, what's happening that month. So you can see the ones for St. Patrick's Day, and one that we had sort of focused on March Madness, and then Valentine's Day. And what this does is it allows our counselors, teachers, agency partners to just go to this site, and with a click of a button, they can share these things to their social network. So we tried to make it super easy for them to share any of this information that they wanted. And you'll see we have those social shorts there. We have our commercials there. And you can kind of go through it and just have fun with it. But we try to update that monthly and keep it fresh. And the way we communicate this with our partners is we have a monthly newsletter that goes out to all the school counselors in Nebraska. And we also have a newsletter that goes about quarterly to all of our agency partners. And we do Google group posts, say that 3 times fast. And we also have single subject emails, because we have a pretty large list of contacts that we share this stuff with. So it's been performing really well. I'm sure everybody's wondering maybe some practical takeaways from this. We know this ad campaigns can be expensive. They come at a price, but some practical takeaways is that relationships matter. As Daphne indicated, we've been doing this for about 40 years, and it took a lot of time to establish really good working relationships with all of our partners across the state. And so when this issue came up, we were able to bring those groups together, create that task force, work together to figure out a way to really make an impact in a very quick time frame. And so convening those stakeholders and asking them what their needs were and how could we figure out a way to, make those things happen, was critical. And then that continual communication, like I said, letting people know, hey, we updated the social press kit, or every monthly meeting when we have our task force, bringing different issues to light. And those are all things that are free, right? It's free to create relationships, to establish communication networks. And so if we could, give any advice moving forward, it'd be to start there. So now I'll turn it over to Richie Morrow from the Coordinating Commission.
Thanks, Reagan. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about our FAFSA Completion website. We do a lot of the same things that Iowa does. We just have a different portal that folks use. Some of you might be familiar with what this looks like. We got it from Colorado back, I don't know what it was, 11, 12 years ago. They developed this with funds from the Crestview Foundation and made it available to other states. And it's what we started using. It's what we're still using. I am working with my IT person. I think we're going to do a new version of it and rebuild it for next year. But we do a lot of the same things. What you're seeing here on the screen right now is the public page. Anybody can have access to this website where they can go in and just see the basic information. We track all 12th graders from the public high schools, And then just like Iowa, if a private school wants to participate, they can do so as well. We also work with some nonprofit organizations like College Possible, like Urban League. They can sign up and give us a list of their students that they're working with, and we'll track those students as well. But like I said, anybody can come to this site. They can see how it's doing. Eric, if you want to go to the next slide. So then, of course, we have available student-specific data that anybody who wants to access this at the high school does need to fill out an agreement for us. We allow the agreement to last for 5 years. We don't make them do it every year. We've got a really good relationship with our schools and our counselors. And, you know, if we have a changeover in the counselors, we're notified and we can go out and we can remove somebody that's no longer there. But once they fill out the agreement and do their registration, then they can come in and log into the system and take a look and see, just like Iowa does, the students that have completed, have submitted the FAFSA, and if that FAFSA is complete or if it's incomplete. Eric, if you want to go to the next screen, you can see here, you know, these are the students, what they see is not complete. We don't get into much detail. We really want the student to go to the studentaid.gov website, pull up their FAFSA, take a look at it, find out what the problem is, whether it's on their end or the contributor's side, and get that issue resolved so they can get it resubmitted and get it turned back in to Department of Ed and get it reprocessed. And then, of course, we'll get those updated files, and we'll update this information and hopefully get them all going from not complete to complete. We have an option where students or counselors can let us know. Same thing if the student says, hey, I did the FAFSA. If the name's not on there, we have a missing student option. Since January, I've looked at a little over 250 students trying to find out why they said they did the FAFSA, but they're not on the website. Again, as Liz mentioned, a lot of it is names. We get nicknames from our K-12 agency, and of course the FAFSA has the legal name. We're really running into issues with students that have 2 last names, hyphenated last names where only one is showing up in one file, but 2 or vice versa in the other file. But we're able to track them down and we're able to help them out and let counselors know who they need to work with and who's done everything that they need to do for the year. So it's a pretty simple process. We try to keep it up to date. We do it weekly also. We don't send out a report. These high school reps do have to log into our website and take a look at their data. But like I mentioned, we're going to do some rewriting of this program next year. So who knows what we're going to do with it at that time. So Eric, Daphne, I don't know if there's anything else. Or Jenny, if we turn it over to you now.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's exciting to hear about all this important work and the different ways that states are able to bite off a piece of it and really take advantage of it. So we have had one question in the chat, and though it was answered already by Elizabeth. Thank you, Elizabeth. I wanted to go back and make sure I read it and read the answer, or let you answer it, Elizabeth, so that others can hear that. And then we will wait for others to put some more some more questions in there. So first of all, this question says, you mentioned rallying community partners like the Iowa College Access Network. How are these partners included? Do they have access to student level data? Are they connecting more intentionally with school counselors based on FAFSA data? So Liz, I know you wrote a nice answer, but I'd love for you to answer verbally if your internet is.
I'm going to answer on her behalf because she's still having Zoom issues.
Okay,
It keeps kicking her out. So, but essentially our response on this is we closely partner with ICANN in terms of the implementation of events and supporting the work on the ground. They're currently not an authorized entity to receive the FAFSA reports directly, but they do work directly with the schools. So we kind of do our best to work through the data issues related to that.
Great. All right. Thank you. Okay, so anyone who wants to look, you'll be able to find that in the Q&A. I'll wait for some others. Go ahead and put some questions in there, folks. Here's a question I have. How did you decide that the focus in Iowa was going to be on this data relationship? Because I know in a lot of places a lot of the states we talk to, sharing the data, having it be timely, having then also the high school counselors know how to use it. I mean, that's a huge issue. I'd love to hear the story of how Iowa decided that that's the focus of a lot of its work.
Excellent question. So we had been doing a lot of the groundwork in terms of several programs where we were assisting with the capacity building and direct assistance on the ground. But we always tend to hear a lot of anecdotal data about, well, the student's not going to file, the student doesn't need to file, and just people kind of making assumptions. And so what we wanted to do is let the data talk and also make it in a way that anyone could access it, and there was not a barrier that would maybe prohibit them from getting access to it. Now, admittedly, our current system, we don't make them sign a data sharing agreement every year, but we do have one person that has to go through just like a little step to just say, yes, I agree, I have these responsibilities. And we still once in a while get schools that are like, no, I don't want to do that. And we're like, do you want to be the only school that doesn't do that? Because everyone has access. It doesn't mean they use it. But we will provide support along the lines of utilizing that data. So it really came down to what could we leverage that we have access to that isn't always going to be putting people on the ground, but we've married that together with the people on the ground, the programs and support.
That's great. Wonderful. Yeah, I know just the types of things you were saying. I do hear people saying, well, people on the ground, the counselors there face to face with the students, they don't have time, they don't feel comfortable. A lot of times they don't feel like they're enough of an expert in this field, and they often are reticent to take that on. So let's see, someone is asking a question. What are some initial thoughts on how universal FAFSA is going this first year in Nebraska? So there's a Nebraska question.
Richie, you and I want to tag team on that.
Yeah,
So
go ahead,
we've
Deb.
been doing lots of FAFSA completion activities at schools and supporting completion activities in schools. Our completion rate, if I looked this morning, is 46%. I think that's probably on par with what it was a couple of years ago. We always have that the COVID factor, right? What we have found is honestly, we don't know how many students are actually completing the opt-out. That is not a public reported data element anywhere, except at the end of the year, the Department of Education has to report the percentage of opt-out and the percentage of FAFSA completion to the legislature. So we've had some events that haven't had great attendance. And what we don't know is, have the students already opted out, or are they waiting? And is that influx of FAFSA completions yet to happen? We know and have said a number of times, FAFSA filing should not be a reason that a student would not graduate from high school. So in the event they haven't taken that action, the school administrator or a school counselor, right, could sign the individual out, opt them out of the requirement. The other important thing is, if they opted out because let's say they graduated early and didn't know, we've been talking and really making them know that FAFSA completion is still an option for them.
Great. Good. Are you able to get that kind of data? Sometimes I know once they graduate, it's hard to sometimes get those other data elements.
I mean, we get all the 12th graders. I mean, even if they're mid-year graduates.
Okay.
So that does come over from our K through 12 agency. I can tell you, I have been a lot busier these last couple of weeks with the missing student requests from counselors. And I have a feeling I'll get a lot busier as graduation gets closer. This is the first year of this program.
Right.
And, I'm sure Daphne and Eric and Reagan can second this, that Counselor, it's a learning process for the counselors. How do we do this? What do we need to do? How do we make this work? And I think with all of us put together and all the webinars that we've done with our colleagues over at NDE, the K through 12 agency, we've been working with the counselors and helping them. But of course, the FAFSA came out late again this year. Hopefully it'll come out October 1st. And now that counselors kind of have this process a year under their belt, that it'll just get a little bit easier and easier to work with the students next year.
Yeah, that would be my guess as well. As this goes on for a few years, the process will become easier and more efficient. So great. So here's a question for the EducationQuest presenters. How did you all approach state leadership as a college access planning program in regard to taking initiative on statewide FAFSA completion efforts? What hurdles did you all have to jump over to gain traction across the state and build credibility among state leaders and supporters to get a universal FAFSA bill passed?
Daphne, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can. So, and Richie, you can speak to that too. So the law was brought forth through the legislature, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong on the date, like 2021, and was vetoed by the governor.
2020.
Because 2020 was vetoed by the governor because it didn't have an education component to it, right? And so that same lawmaker then brought it forward in the 22 legislative session. And it was included as part of what we call a Christmas tree bill, right? The budget bill at the end of the year that everything got tethered to. And it was approved and signed that way. But as a way of addressing the governor's concern with not having the academic component, that's where we did the crosswalk of the lesson plan to both school counselor standards along with personal finance standards in the state to help kind of shore up the answer to that argument.
That sounds great. Thank you.
I'd also just say we work really well with the Coordinating Commission and the Nebraska Department of Ed. We've got very strong relationships. And so when we had several initial meetings about, okay, this is going to happen, what does this look like? The creation of that task force was very simple and an easy ask. We reached out to individuals that we knew were influencers in their constituent groups, asked if they wanted to be a part, and it was a resounding yes. So
that's great. Well, I will underscore relationships as the bedrock of all of this work. I mean, it's the relationship between that counselor and that student, or or with the parents or with the families, and all those connections in the communities at every level. Strong relationships really facilitate all of this work. Thank you. All right, here's another question. Are there any plans to collect and analyze demographic information on students who do or do not complete the FAFSA, or who have opted out in the case of Nebraska? And I think in both states, we can answer that question, but probably in different ways.
So the K through 12 agency, NDE, has all of that information in their student records, but I don't anticipate them releasing that publicly. They might look at it internally, but I don't see them, sharing that with the public or us or anyone else for that matter.
How about Iowa? Do you have that data, and do you use it and make any pivots in your strategy accordingly?
Yes, actually, we generally do an annual, though we didn't miss last year, FAFSA Filing in Iowa report that is published, that talks about the trends and characteristics of both the filers and then non-filers, and that does drive a lot of our programming, because we know who's less likely to file a FAFSA, and we have looked at it beyond our high school seniors, and also looking at refilers and also those who may be out of education and going back into education.
Sure. All right, well, I'm going to squeeze in one last question. Are your programs to increase FAFSA completion focused primarily on seniors, or are you starting with younger students?
So in Nebraska, our FAFSA completion efforts have been focused on seniors because of the requirement. But as I said earlier, EducationQuest, we provide college access resources in school starting in 6th grade. So we hope by the time they are a high school junior and senior, EducationQuest is a known name and they know what kind of resource to go to for assistance.
Great.
The same for Iowa. Obviously, FAFSA completion itself is focused on seniors, but we implement different programs and support that build. Gear Up starts at 7th grade, works its way up. We have down into elementary school financial aid support and curricula that go into schools to help support schools in implementing things that, again, prepare, just as Nebraska mentioned as well.
Wonderful. Thank you all. We are at time. A lot of folks in the chat saying how great this was, and I have to concur. Mary has posted all of the resources here, and always send us an email if you need more follow-up. We will make sure that you know how to connect with these folks who are doing this amazing work, and it's so inspirational. So thank you all so much for the work you do and for sharing that with us today in this webinar. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.